To the Web Bluetooth community meeting for TPAC 2016 September.
Hello.
So let's do some quick introductions. Perhaps the room can introduce themselves.
Okay, so here is the room at TPAC. I'm chairing the Web NFC working group, and there are some cross-cutting issues or like collaboration opportunities, like handover across Web NFC and Web Bluetooth. And then I think if we go with the room starting from this corner, so Kenneth.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kenneth. I work for Intel, so I'm one of the Web NFC editors. And we've also worked with Web Bluetooth, where people work in Web Bluetooth as well, and they're interested in that work.
Yeah, Zoltan, nice to meet you. It's pity you're not here. I was counting on meeting you. But I think that these questions are that what can we use in the Web NFC spec that you figured out in Web Bluetooth. And we see more and more these two specs kind of completing each other in many use cases. So we are definitely interested in this bootstrapping use case. And yeah.
Okay.
Me? Yes, okay. Oh, nice to meet you. My name is Tomoyuki Shimizu from KTDI Japan. I am, so as one of Japanese mobile network operator, we have interested in how smartphones and devices can be connected, and so maybe we expect that there are many use cases for Web Bluetooth and Web NFC. Thank you.
I am Riju. I'm work with the spec and also the code part in generic sensor API. Did some for the NFC also, but not many months.
Nice to meet you. My name is Daisuke Ajitomi from Toshiba. And Toshiba has developed high-speed near-field communication. I don't know you. Transfer jet, you know. And we want to introduce we want to use transfer jet on the web, and so I want to check the feasible. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Hyunjin, MG Care in Korea. I'm just observing. Thank you.
Dominica Zalmacio, I'm the staff contact for the device and sensor and WebRTC working group. And I'm interested in both Web NFC and Web Bluetooth and how they can start their standardization path as well.
All right, that was the room introduction. So handing over to remote chair.
I'm Jeffrey. I guess started the Web Bluetooth effort along with Vince. I've written most of the Bluetooth spec, Web Bluetooth spec. Let's see, and I'm also involved with like the permissions spec and have commented on the NFC spec.
I'm Vincent Scheib. I also work at Google on Chrome with Jeffrey and help co-start the Web Bluetooth effort. All right, it's hard to, I will nominate Giovanni to introduce himself next.
Okay. Hi, I'm Giovanni. I also work at Google. I work on the implementation of the Web Bluetooth API.
How about Francois, perhaps?
Yep. So I'm Francois. I'm leading Google developer relation efforts around the Web Bluetooth API, and I'm hugely interested in Web USB, WebC, Web Serial, Web Bluetooth, everything.
And I see a Stanley Fung. Sorry if I have the pronunciation wrong.
Yes, hi. My name is Stanley. I'm from Malaysia. I'm working for the government here to provide a new user experience from the Web Bluetooth side.
And Karsten?
You're muted in case you've forgotten that.
Yeah, we can come back to Karsten if necessary as well. We also have a Julian.
Oh, so yeah, I'm Julian working at Logitech. So we do have a couple of mice, keyboards, and audio devices running Bluetooth stacks, and also proprietary protocols. So in the past, I worked with Google on Chrome.feed API. And now we are really interested in participating to open source and standards, and also having the device being supported. And also we are really thrilled by direct firmware to the web communications and cross-platform stuff. So that's all ranging from Bluetooth to USB serial, etc. But Bluetooth and BLE is definitely, combined with physical web, a huge step forward. So we're pleased to be in.
Great. I think that's good for introductions. That's everyone we have on the video call as well. So perhaps we want to go to structuring a brief agenda for what to talk through.
Yeah, so one thing that we should probably do is go through the tricky issues. I've labeled a bunch of them with initial GATT communication or complete GATT communication. Let me put this in the chat. So we can go through the initial GATT communication list and come up with a kind of a rough resolution for all of them, which I'll get into the spec over the next couple weeks. And then if we have time, go through the complete GATT communication and do the same.
Sounds good to me. Are there any other proposals for major agenda items?
Sorry guys. Just maybe one is the support in other, I don't know if it's planned, but in a WebKit or other implementations, not only Chrome.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about what we know about other implementations plans. Do we have any other implementers here? Yeah, so I think it will just be Chrome's impression of everyone else's plans.
Okay.
Yeah, so I suppose we can, do we, perhaps we should cover that briefly first?
Okay. I'm telling Zakim what the agenda is.
Okay, I can start walking over the.
Yeah, so the.
You're logging. Okay.
Right. The implementation status document in the Bluetooth repository is probably the best place to go for this, because it's where we've been writing everything. I guess I can share that. Let's see if cast works. So in case you don't know about this, oops, nope, that doesn't work.
No, I'm sharing this document here. So.
Okay.
It's out of mute.
We should be able to use the Hangout feature in the top left, the share screen, which is a green rectangle icon with an arrow.
Yeah.
You have it? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I was trying to do it through the presentation API, which Chrome now supports, and that failed. So I'm now using the Hangouts native.
Oh, yeah. I need to talk to people working with me. Mark.
Okay, so Chrome status is pretty detailed here. You probably are all familiar with kind of how far we've gotten. Opera is based on Chromium, so they're about the same place. Yeah. Servo has a good page of their status. So they've split it into the JavaScript API, which is largely done. Like they've made a lot of progress there. And the platform surface, so they've got Linux and part of Android. I don't know how much of Android they have done. And then Firefox has stopped work on the API for now. We think that it's because they just don't have enough people to do all of the new APIs that they want to do. They have some security concerns, but it seems like that wasn't the primary reason that they stopped working on it. Let's see, Edge. Oh,
yeah, the same. Sorry, with Firefox and WebNFC, so we actually lost Firefox implementer due to the same reasons, I assume. So maybe they initially Mozilla was committed to implement WebNFC, but then I think a year ago or so we kind of lost our contact there, and I think that was deprioritized.
Yeah, when they canceled Firefox OS, that kind of group seems to have gotten repurposed.
Yes, the same impact for us, for NFC.
Yeah. Edge has said that they're interested, but similarly, they don't have enough people to work on it right now. I haven't heard any security concerns with them, but it's possible, of course, when they actually sit down to think about it, that they'll come up with some. Safari, as usual, says nothing. And I'm not intimately familiar with Samsung Internet. Because they're based on Chromium, they should have a head start. They just need to implement the API. But I haven't talked to any of them. And that's what we know.
We can actually talk to Chunky Song
Oh, yeah.
from who's the editor of Service Worker Spec, for example. Right. So we can try to connect with him here and ask him to, talk to you guys about their plans.
That would be cool. Thanks. Okay, any other comments on implementation status?
So guys, sorry again, I'm a bit late. Any interest for developers to start participating in WebKit? Because I was in contact with, I tried to open something for Logitech, and I was told by a guy from Intel, Alexis Ménard, I don't know if you know, from the XQT WebKit team, that the only way to have it done is to start committing in WebKit.
Right.
Otherwise, our fear at Logitech is that within 2 or 3 years, only Chrome support, and the other web browser will let it's deprioritized unless we participate. So we'll try to find someone to start. But is there any other interest in the room for WebKit?
Yeah, I think the Chrome team, we've actually talked about going that route. Right now, we don't have the resources to do
Yeah.
to do the 2 implementations,
Yeah,
but
sure.
It could definitely help.
Okay. Well, we'll try to look at if we find someone as well. But we have no expertise in WebKit, but we can try to find someone.
So, I think the 2 projects have diverged so much at this point that the reuse code, I don't know what is how much you could reuse across WebKit and Blink.
I don't know. I guess a lot of the implementation code side might be similar, but when you say WebKit, do you think Safari or do you think like WebKit derived browsers?
Yeah, I was thinking primarily about Safari, but I was also told by the guys main committers of WebKit that the only way to have it in Safari is go through WebKit. But as Logitech and as device vendors, we are really interested in really cross-platform stuff. So if we want, I don't know also what's the full process to have it to have Web Bluetooth API coming in the standards. Is a Safari support needed at some point, or?
I think the thing is, I cannot speak for Apple, but I'm pretty sure that, like, of course, the implementation needs to be there, but it can also be political that they will have to look through the API, decide whether they think it fits Safari. So it also blocks on what they want to ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting it implemented in WebKit is kind of the first step, and it's scary to do it because we have no guarantee that having an implementation in WebKit will cause it to show up in Safari.
But is it mandatory to have? I mean, I'm not familiar with the full steps of having a full standardization of Web Bluetooth, and if it's a goal, well, is it needed to have it in all the web browsers, or should you ship something and standardize at W3C level?
Right.
Without Safari support.
This is something that Dom is probably best to answer.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Dom is moving toward the mic, so.
Yeah, so first a clarification, the Web Bluetooth API so far is in pre-standardization stage. Community group is not a formal standardization work, although the Web Bluetooth itself, the Web Bluetooth API itself is quite well advanced. In general, so for the specification to go through the full WCC standardization process, we require at least 2 independent implementations. Sometimes part of that process is also get commitment or at least manifestation of interest from other implementers. And I guess as I mentioned when I introduced myself, and as I mentioned to Jeffrey before as well, part of my interest is to figure out if and when the Web Bluetooth API should start its formal standardization process. But in general, the work of defining the standard and implementing it is something that is done on an iterative process in WCC. There is not specification time and then the implementation. The 2 times to go together because once you start implementing it, and once you start implementing it in different contexts and implementations, you start seeing new feedback, new issues that arise. So.
Yeah, so the servo implementation will probably count as a second implementation for the W3C's purposes, but for practical web development, we'd like shipping browsers with a lot of use to implement it. And for that, like, clearly Safari is important. We're hoping to get it into the other browsers and then use the fact that web pages are using it to pull Safari along.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't think, I mean, in the WCC process, you could probably make the argument that servo serves as a second implementation, but that would probably be, let's say, poorly received because the process also prefers widely shipping implementations because that's where you get a real spec feedback, not from more experimental.
Yeah, I think actually the most likely path, the second widely available implementation, might be through Mozilla and Firefox, because I think it's just a resource issue as far as I see it. So they have no fundamental blockers for not doing it if they just find the right people. Because if you, as far as I understand, the Firefox OS, after Firefox OS, the focus was put on something called like Web of Things, Internet of Things, Flyweb, that type. Anyways, but I think devices that need this type of connectivity, like Bluetooth, is essential for the new Mozilla, as far as I know. So I mean, we just need to find the right people, and I think we can try to talk to people here. There's a bunch of Mozillans here as well, so try to get their feedback. Sadly, they are not in this room now, but during the week, and let you know.
Thanks a lot, guys.
It would be good if folks in Lisbon would bring it up if you're having conversations with people that you think might be close to relevant. Kind of raise the API as a discussion topic, perhaps in open discussion times. That would be very good to help socialize the readiness.
Sure.
Okay, so would we like to move on to reviewing some of the open spec issues then?
Sure. Let me pull up the issue list. Okay. So for just going kind of in order, for changing advertised UUIDs, the proposal that we landed on was to remove the UUIDs field entirely. So Bluetooth device currently has a list of the UUIDs that are supported. It's not clear what that means. We inherited it kind of blindly from the Chrome.Bluetooth API. And there it includes both classic UUIDs and advertised and discovered UUIDs. So we were thinking that we would just remove it and have people say what they want. So get primary services in order to discover all the UUIDs, watch advertisements in order to get the advertised UUIDs. The one downside of that is that the UUIDs field will tell you what was advertised before you were given permission to use the device. And it's both a little worrying to expose that, but also potentially useful because you don't have to wait for more advertisements to come in. Do people have opinions, or should we just go ahead and remove the UUIDs field? And the Lisbon room is muted in case you're talking.
Yeah, I think Lisbon room is in agreement. At least I don't hear any concerns with removal.
Okay, then I will commit that change. Second one, okay. Don't overload allowed services is pretty much bookkeeping. I don't think there's any discussion needed. Right value, updating the value. Right now in the spec, if you call right value to a characteristic, it will update the characteristic's value. So characteristics have a .value field that gives you the last value that was read from them or notified from them. And right value also updates that. And the argument is that characteristics don't necessarily behave as a thing with a value. And so writing doesn't necessarily update that value in like the value that you would read. And so perhaps right value should not change that field. So I think I was waiting for other people using the API to weigh in. Anyone else have thoughts?
No comments.
Yep. Let's see. Yeah, I'm still nervous about kind of continuing to make changes speculatively during the origin trial without getting developers to tell us like this is working or this isn't. But that does seem like a reasonable change. So.
So are you planning to keep the pull requests open on like for some period of time, or you are landing them?
I'm generally trying to mail the mailing list with an announcement of each pull request that seems to matter. So not bookkeeping ones always, but things like behavior changes. I'm always trying to do that, and then leave them open for at least a day or two to see if there's comments. For ones that
anyone on the origin trial, will they also get these emails because they might not be subscribed to the real list?
It's a good point. The origin trial people may not be subscribed to that mailing list. Vince, do you remember if we signed them up for any particular mailing list? Did we say Web Bluetooth at Chromium?
No, they have to provide an email address, but that kind of goes into the origin trial group and is. I think that we can generate emails to everyone who signed up, I think. But I don't think that this has been done for anything other than the mechanics of updating the origin trial token. But we could.
And we should encourage them to join a mailing list voluntarily, even if we don't automatically join them.
Yeah, I think what will happen if something breaks, they probably do a Google search and land on this GitHub repo and figure it out. But yeah, I think it makes sense to let them know before. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's remember to. I think I'd like them to all join the public Web Bluetooth list because that's where spec discussion should happen. Let's try to generate a mail to everyone asking them to join that list. Okay, for the secure device firmware update, that was a question about when we're blacklisting things like the insecure firmware update services. How do people know that the services that they're using are not going to be blacklisted? And so I put together a pull request for the blacklist that kind of describes the goals there. I can pull up the PR. I think I'm not going to leave it up long enough to actually read it, but it's got kind of goals for how we want to add things to the blacklist, and then a description of the firmware update services, which are not really how we like to get things added. I'm pausing for comments, but I will go on to the next issue if there aren't any. Okay. Operations in progress. We currently, several platforms only allow you to do one thing at a time. The Web Bluetooth spec currently assumes that you can do multiple things at a time, and that the UA should handle it. But it looks like there is actually no way for the UA to guarantee that it doesn't get in-progress errors. And so we need to spec that kind of from any operation, you might get an in-progress error. And then you just kind of have to wait and try again at some point. That's not really satisfying, but it doesn't seem like there's anything else that we can do. I think the guidance to developers would be to serialize their use of the API within a single tab, and then hope for the best. Just retry later if they get an in-progress error. For extended properties, there are two characteristic properties that are not immediately retrieved when you look at the characteristic. You have to read a descriptor to get them. The spec currently says to read that descriptor when you're creating the characteristic object. And in the implementation, it would be easier to wait and avoid some delay to wait. And that also, it seems like people are not going to use those properties very often, and so it's probably best to give people their characteristic instead of making them wait to read the descriptor. Should just reduce latency a bit. So I expect to make that change. Let's see. Last year, Vince suggested that we should allow connections from only one realm at a time. I don't like this idea. Vince, do you want to talk about it?
It has been a while, so I'd have to refresh myself on it. I don't know if it's a strong opinion. Perhaps it was just trying to gain clarity. Because I'm talking, I can't see your projection. Okay, I'm back to seeing it. So I don't see that we need to restrict it to one origin. Clearly, if you open an application that was not intending to be used from multiple tabs, it may interfere with itself. The web does have the primitives necessary via, at a minimum, shared workers or local storage to try to communicate across multiple tabs, so they can avoid this themselves. Across different origins, they would not be able to protect against errors. And yeah, it might just be a little bit confusing why things don't work. How often this occurs is probably very low. I think it's unlikely users will come across multiple tabs they open to be working with the same device.
Yeah, and my worry is that they will intentionally open two tabs to the same device. And if we restrict it to only one at a time, then either we have to block the second one or kind of close the connection from the first. And that's likely to cause more confusion than, if they've got a device that only expects to be working with one tab at a time and they open two tabs and actively use it from both at the same time, that kind of makes sense that it might break because they're using it, they're actively using two tabs at once. And most of the time they'll have two tabs open, but they'll only be clicking on one, and so only one will actually be sending commands. So it should mostly work.
Yeah. So I won't put up a large, objection to this. I think for practicality, we can move forward. Use the simpler method. Simply allow the connections, unless anyone else believes there are concerns.
Yeah, maybe I added one last point for that one, but I'm in favor of multi-connection, because we've got some apps which are already where the devices talk to several apps. So if you have a service worker for displaying, I don't know, custom notifications and a dedicated web page for that, then we won't have the ability to have two apps communicating at the same time. So at my side, I really prefer not having a limitation for that.
Mm-hmm. So you're also in favor of just closing the issue without making a change, sounds like.
Yes, sorry, yes, yeah.
Okay. If there are no objections to that, I will go ahead and close the issue. Okay. Okay, when a device is paired, and this is the Bluetooth pairing, not web Bluetooth pairing. When a device is paired, you might discover that another device that you were previously talking to is actually the same device. If a device is using resolvable random addresses, then you might have several different addresses, and then you pair and you discover all of them were actually the same device. What I'm suggesting to do is kind of nothing. So when you, the web page has gotten several devices with different IDs, now one pairs and the UA discovers that they were all the same. We just don't tell the web page. They have a couple other devices that they will never see again, and they just handle the paired one moving forward, and it'll have a stable ID from then on. So that needs to be specified, but I think no particular implementation change. Anyone think we should do something different? Okay. Mark that with need wording so that. Enforce range is a detail of the like WebIDL. I don't think there's anything we can do on that right now. It basically says that if you pass a number that's outside of the range of a short or a long, then you would get an error instead of mapping it to 0. And WebIDL doesn't currently support the necessary annotation, so we're waiting for WebIDL to catch up. For using Bluetooth objects after the originating document is closed, I think the implementation automatically closes the Bluetooth object when the tab is closed, even if you still have a reference to the original tab. I haven't tried this, so I'm not certain that's right. It's currently not specified to do that, and the web doesn't really have the notion of closing a tab. The web is all ref counted, or garbage collected. It seems reasonable to say that when you close the tab, your device may stop working. I just have to figure out how to specify that. The next issue about service changed is about changing how we express service changed events. This is not implemented yet in Chrome, so we're not going to get feedback from the origin trial about it, but it changes it from kind of separate events for each way that services might change into something, I think, based on mutation records, where you just get a list of changes all in one event. And that seems like a good change. So it just needs wording. The last 3 are more like think about this questions. So right now it's not clear, and we haven't written tests for when you connect a device via web Bluetooth and then it starts advertising a keyboard service, do operating systems trust that as a keyboard? This could be a way of getting malicious stuff onto people's computers. And we think that that's an OS bug if it happens, but we ought to be aware of what happens. And we just haven't made any progress on testing it. If anyone is interested in volunteering to test that, I think that would be welcome. But otherwise, it seems like we will be able to ship without knowing that answer. But clearly, it would be better to know.
Yeah,
definitely at Logitech we can have a. Sorry, I forgot this one, but we can have a look at the issue.
That would be great.
Actually, but the service, to clarify, the head over GATT service is blacklisted, right?
So a web page will not be able to talk to the keyboard. The worry is that if the web page talks to some other service, like say there's a heart rate monitor, and then the same device also exposes the HID service, will the operating system accept its keystrokes?
Okay. Okay, so we can have a look at it and take it.
Cool. Thank you.
Also, yeah, sure.
Just for, I mean, isn't it at least possible for a device, if a device's firmware is updated and the device basically disconnects and then reconnects, shouldn't it appear as a, it should be available to appear as a keyboard or mouse, but then the operating system should at least require pairing as that HID.
Yeah. The operating system needs or ought to ask the user if they believe this new thing is a keyboard.
So, from my understanding, there are various levels of security, but the vast majority of the keyboards require encryption at some point and entering credential pairing, etc. But there are still different levels of security in Bluetooth, and if you don't have the correct level of security, then you can be subject of man-in-the-middle attacks.
Right.
And there are lots of examples, including I had one colleague at Black Hat this year, where you can take control of light bulbs, etc. So there were really interesting stuff in Black Hat, but most of them rely on the security of Bluetooth low energy itself. So I don't know if the API can do anything, but apart saying to the implementers, please in your device use the maximum highest level of security.
Yeah, even if the keyboard requires the highest level of security in order to act as a keyboard, you might, for another reason, pair a device with that high level of security. I mean, maybe you don't want people spying on your heart rate monitor, and so you actually pair it with a passcode. But if you pair the heart rate monitor with a passcode, and then it maliciously turns into a keyboard, is the keyboard going to be trusted by the operating system? And I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, neither for now, yeah, sure.
Let's see. I think I should probably move the implementation tips document out of the initial list. It doesn't look like we're going to get that done in the near term. And then fingerprinting was a question about when you get to, or how much information you get from the Bluetooth system, which would allow you to track a user across connections. We've basically decided that you don't get the MAC address, and the IDs for your devices should rotate if you clear cookies, but the device's name should stick around and could be used as a unique identifier. So I think this one is basically solved. Like the current state of the API gives an answer to how much fingerprinting we're allowing. But if people have thoughts or want us to change something, you should speak up.
For information, we also have listed the serial number string in the device information service.
Yes. Yeah, all of the standard unique identifiers are blacklisted, but a device can implement its own unique identifiers and then use that to help track a user across sessions.
Sorry, so you blacklisted serial number from DIS, but that's a standard way to retrieve. I've got this twice same mouse, but for instance, and it's maybe it's a limitation for an app not to know if it's the same device, or suppose we have some cloud now. Cloud profiles, and I'm home and I want to have the same setting for the same device, and it can be sought from the cloud. So unless we have well, that's also the case. We already have some required profile, some dedicated service. So you would advise vendors to use a dedicated service and not and you would blacklist the DIS, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, sorry, I was really thinking about the idea, but that doesn't sound too bad yet to do this.
Yeah, the protection in the spec is so that devices can't accidentally be used for fingerprinting.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. Yeah.
So, sorry, I guess I missed what is the proposed plan. But I'm curious, how does it compare to the get user media approach to not keeping device IDs beyond a given session until you grant some level of access to your camera?
Right. So get user media, I think, behaves the same way that we do, except that manufacturers can't provide the extra identifier. As far as the UA knows that a device is the same, if you've been granted access to it, then you get an ID that's specific to that origin. And that ID will persist until the origin's cookies are cleared or storage is cleared in some other way. And then the same device will get a new ID for that origin. Bluetooth has a couple different unique identifiers that are standardized, which would persist past when the origin storage is cleared. And so we disallow access to those so that we can rotate the ID. But Bluetooth also allows vendors to expose arbitrary data in characteristics. And one of those characteristics could easily be another unique ID. And we give up on blocking access to that.
Yeah, and I guess there is really nothing that can be done anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that seems sensible. But you do warn in the spec about that.
Yeah, the spec has a privacy section that basically talks about this.
And to be sure I got this right, this risk only exists once you already granted access to a given Bluetooth device, right?
Yes.
So that seems quite sensible.
Yeah, it's possible that I need to update this privacy section. But I'll go look at that. But it sounds like we're pretty much happy with the current state of fingerprinting. So that's good. Okay, so we have direction for all of the things that I'd identified as like things that we need before shipping. Let me that didn't do what I thought. We can skim the complete GATT communication ones. I haven't gone through these, so there may be ones that have obvious answers. Let me see. So that one I just miscategorized right now. Connect GATT, we've actually been discussing that. Whether it should, when you call connect, should it just wait for a device indefinitely or should it time out after a certain amount of time? And there's questions about whether, like, which operating systems allow us to do which behaviors. And so we just need to investigate that some. and figure out what works. It seems like the goal is to make Connect wait forever, but if we can't implement that, then we might do something else. Pair when the user's paying attention. When you communicate with a characteristic that requires pairing, right now I believe it pops up a dialog kind of when you try to communicate, and that's not great for the UI. We haven't investigated this in detail, so we don't know for sure what every operating system does. But it would be nice to have an API that allows that tells the web page that pairing is needed and lets it actually do it at a later time.
I think Mac pairs automatically.
Yeah, and doesn't even notify Chrome that it's going to want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there may be nothing we can do here.
Just charging my phone.
It would be nice to have connectable filters in various places, but it looks like Android doesn't tell us. There's kinds of advertisements. One allows you to connect and the other one doesn't. And some operating systems will tell us that and Android won't. So we'll need to figure out if we can change Android or what to do about having different operating systems behave somewhat differently. I think the MTU is probably solved. We just have a spec change to tell implementations to negotiate the biggest MTU they can. What was GET connection status behavior? Oh, this is physical versus logical connections, I think.
Yeah, it's closed for me. Sorry, it was not clear. So it's more logical. So we are in logical communication, and physical communication is something internal to the UI.
Yeah. Yeah, the model in the spec is that you connect different tabs independently or disconnect them independently, and there's no way to force a physical disconnection from the Web Bluetooth API, and that's to isolate origins from each other. There are a couple use cases for forcing a physical disconnection. Right now, we're suggesting that devices that need to do that have a characteristic that makes the device force a disconnection. But it's possible that we'd want to reverse the decision in the spec and allow one tab to forcibly disconnect all the other ones. And I think we can keep discussing that kind of in the next several months. Write without response, and kind of the three different variations on write. We need to add an API to control which is used. It doesn't seem like an emergency, but people have been asking for it. Similarly, the prepared writes, there's just nothing in the spec that talks about them. And so that's something to think about also. We would like to be able to pass this stuff to a service worker and use it from the background, but there are permission questions there, and we have to think about the API that we need. We haven't implemented service change yet. It's not clear that Android does support it, and so we might need some extra API surface to deal with various operating systems not telling us that services have changed. iframe access is going to happen via the feature policy API, which is under development. For now, the Chrome implementation disallows cross-origin access, or disallows access from cross-origin iframes. So you could not embed an iframe that connects to a Bluetooth device unless you wrote the iframe.
Yeah, is this spec the key user for the policy spec that you talked about? So, or is there other features that are actually first?
Sorry, could you ask that again?
Yeah, so you talked about this issue, figure out limit access to iframes. So could you describe like what is the mechanism you plan to use?
Right, so there's a feature policy spec which Ilya Grigoric is working on.
Yeah, I'm just want to know that if this is the same spec that I think I've seen. Okay, yeah, it's this incubation thing. Yeah,
it's in incubation. The idea is that the top level page should be able to specify which features it and its child iframes are allowed to use. And some of them default to allowed and some of them default to disallowed. And you can use this to say that, like, I want to be able to use Bluetooth, but I don't want the people who are advertising on my page to be able to use it. But I do want this other subdomain to use it. And so this is a generic mechanism to do that sort of whitelisting and blacklisting.
Okay.
So we'll just reuse it for Bluetooth. And
okay, good.
Yeah, as a stopgap, we just disallow all cross-origin access, but that will get fixed as feature policy rolls out.
Okay, this is great. So this is not the first feature to use this, or feature.
The feature of vibrate.
Yeah, exactly. I saw like vibrate, which is close to my range. So do you know what is the first feature that we'll use? Feature policy.
I think vibrate is one of the motivations that they want to be able to block use of vibrate from ads. But it's not that one feature is going to use this first. Feature policy is a system for disabling and enabling other features. And so when they implement it, I think all features will get it at once.
Okay. Okay, now I see. So the spec actually enumerates the features. Okay.
Yeah, they have a big list of features, including a bunch of permissions. And yeah.
Yeah, is this mapping directly to the permission name, like the feature name? Okay.
That mapping isn't unified yet, but the goal is to have the same list in both places.
Okay, makes sense.
Which makes sense for generic sensors.
Yeah, exactly. We had this discussion in generic sensor session, like how to craft the permission names.
Yeah.
So this is good feedback. Because we might do something with the feature policy in sensors as well.
Yeah, definitely be aware of this spec in sensors.
Create an issue.
Yeah, no, well, you can create this issue.
Something.
Okay. Delegation.
It's ping pong in the room.
Okay. Caching immutable characteristics. There are some characteristics that their specification says they can't change. UAs should probably be allowed to cache them. Right now, the spec doesn't allow for it. This seems pretty low priority, but at some point we should probably write down that you can cache if you know something special about the characteristic. Right now, once you start notifications, your page has to remember whether you have. It would be straightforward to expose a Boolean saying that this characteristic is sending notifications. Start and stop notifications, the spec, and this is kind of a general problem across web APIs. The spec says do this stuff in parallel, which allows it to interleave. And so you can actually get a situation where you call start and then stop, and the start steps happen before the stop step, or the stop happens before start, even though you called it after. And we just need to figure out a way in web specs to write that things don't interleave. That's not, so we need a more sophisticated notion of threading, and that shouldn't affect behavior, but nails down kind of what's allowed to happen. We need more examples. We need a request multiple devices function, and that will just happen when we get around to it. Reconnection is about, or this issue was about AutoConnect, which I think is handled by the hanging connect stuff that I just added. So I should double check that and probably close this issue. A new use case, and again, devices that come into range later is another hanging connect case. So that's all of the issues about GATT communication. There's also some issues about like scanning and being a GATT server, but those are for kind of the next version of the API entirely. So I don't suggest that we go through them. Okay, anyone else have stuff to say about issues, or should we go on to talking about standardization and being in a working group and stuff? Oops, you're muted. Lisbon is muted, so we can't hear you.
So Dom, the team contact, or the W3C contact, he left for a while. I think he will be back soon. So maybe that's, we need to wait for a while for that topic. So we might want to pick some coffee, or do you have some other topics you would like to discuss beyond the working group thing? Yeah.
I don't have anything in particular.
Okay. I can go quickly look if I can find the guy. So if you hang around for a minute.
Okay.
So I maybe pull him in. So wait a second.
I will go get breakfast.
Yeah, he wanted to talk about this, obviously. So I will find him. So I'll be back in let's say 5 minutes.
Cool.
So I think I left at the wrong time. You were saying you wanted to discuss a working group formation, or?
Yeah, we have run out of other things to talk about, so we may as well talk about moving to a working group.
That sounds good.
Let's see. So I think the place we left it last year was that everyone was kind of fine with going to a working group, but I never got around to actually doing anything about it. We have to have some opinion about which working group we go to. It seems like web apps and the device working group are both active and could be good places. I don't know that we have many opinions about where to go.
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe give you some very high-level pros and cons and possibilities. So, well, first, you could have your own working group. That's always an option.
I think we want to avoid that.
So, yeah, I mean, I would suggest not doing this, but that's always an option if for any reason the two others or any other option is too hard. You could also have like Web USB, Web NFC, I mean, all these emerging specs trying to get together into a new working group in itself. And so web apps versus device and sensors. So web apps is like what we end up calling super groups because they deal with life, universe, and everything. The good thing is that you get a good exposure in terms of participants. You get a very broad set of IBR commitments. The difficult part is getting added because they already have a huge charter. It takes a lot of negotiation to get any stuff added to the charter because also of the large number of participants. Device and sensor is a smaller group, to be quite clear. I think we're doing unbiased. It's much easier to add stuff there because it's very, I mean, obviously both Bluetooth and NFC and all the other stuff feels very devicey, so it's quite clearly in the overall scope of the group. You probably get somewhat less exposure because it's less popular groups than web apps, but you get folks like ANSI and so on. And as it happens, I'm the staff contact, so I can fairly easily arrange the whole chartering process and so on. So I mean, I think the path of least resistance is probably device and sensors. Maybe the more ambitious path is or web platform, it's called now. I mean, whichever it is, I'm happy to make it happen. But yeah, at least you guys probably need to decide which of these two.
Right. And we should probably put Bluetooth, NFC, and USB all in the same place.
Yeah, that would seem quite sensible. So,
yeah, I don't have strong opinions.
Sorry. About Web NFC, I think you guys were waiting to find another implementation before starting the transition to working group.
Yeah, kind of. The idea was that we signals from another vendor, one browser vendor, to kind of invest in a working group.
Right.
So I think that is our current thinking. So, but I think if there is like, because I think there is like added value if those three specs would move together. So I mean, if you were to form, move these three specs to either of the groups, I think we might want to do it at the same time. To go alone, like let's say I wouldn't try to form a working group just for Web NFC. I could go with the other similar specs.
Right. So we shouldn't say that they all move at the same time. I think they all pick a destination at the same time, but like the way we've been doing things with incubation, we only want to move things once they've been incubated. And so like it's totally possible that that they would like finish their incubations at different times. I do kind of like the bar that like once a second implementation is actively interested, that's when we move.
Yeah, that's fair, and that's actually what I think as well. So basically, what I'm concerned about is because there's cost involved in creating a working group. So if we can do it together for many, if we recharter a group and we add 3 instead of 1, I think it's the same cost, fixed cost.
We need to analyze the disclosure. By the
way,
they are close.
That discussion is a separate one, whether like in which group it fits and so forth. I think like the other aspect is like sometimes when you have something in a working group, it might be more. Some vendors might prefer a work to be on the standards track before they commit to implement. So I think it might help. So from that perspective, thinking about WebNFC, perhaps we might get someone else interested if we make it to the standards track. I don't know. That's my impression. So yes, I would, if we were to move those 3, I would join you gladly.
Yeah, the Web Apps group has a list of things in incubation. So things that, if the incubation finishes, will go to Web Apps, and it's listed in the charter. But the charter doesn't say that it's already in Web Apps, and so we could try to get that sort of thing put in device and sensors, so that we have a place to go when we think the incubation is done.
Yeah, I think it's like Dom probably when I entered the room with this class, like it's probably easiest to get it, or easier to get it into device and sensors because I mean it's more in scope, let's say, and web platform is probably a broader group, so you get like wider, potentially wider participation, or I think that is fair to say, but it might be harder to get approval for the scope expansion. So
yeah, and I would say, I mean, the wider participation thing used to be true, but nowadays, since most specs are being developed in GitHub, the mailing list has much less importance, and that's really where you got more attention in web apps. And again, I don't even think that it is true.
And also the meetings, they are meeting like on spec basis. So like service workers guys have their own meetings, so it's not like a huge meeting. I think which is a good thing. So you have more focused, smaller like this room, like smaller group of people, but more focused, rather than having like 50 people in your room and only like handful, a subset is actually looking at the thing. So yeah, I mean, device and sensors, maybe when is the next opportunity to charter?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think the real question is when do you want to make the transition? And at that time, we can start the rechartering process. And I personally don't feel that we need or should wait for a particular existing rechartering trigger.
Okay, so
whenever the right time is, this is the time we start the process.
So the plan of record is to first try to do the device and sensors as a primary candidate, so try to put all these 3 specs there.
I'm not sure if we need to pull the 3 of them in the charter at the same time, or 2 of them, or just 1 of them. And so maybe that's actually 3 conversations, although I guess we already have these 2 of them right now.
I think it makes sense to mention all 3 of them, like to add the mention of all 3 of them at the same time, even if the work for them doesn't move until, say, we have a second implementation. Like HTML lists, or the new the new web apps charter lists a couple things that are currently in incubation.
Yeah, so I mean, and I need to look back at the mechanics of that exactly, but I think, saying we will take this over from incubation from rechartering, so I think we should do the actual rechartering, at least start one of them in the formal working group process. And again, I don't know what's the right time for, so for Web Bluetooth, I heard that we had at least this clear second implementation from Servo, which might be signal enough that we need to start the formal standardization process, but you probably know better than I do in this case.
Yeah, I mean, the formal standardization process is not blocking anyone. We have a specification that people can implement from, and Servo has been implementing from it. So they haven't asked us to move to a working group. Mozilla and Edge also have not asked us to move. And of course, we haven't heard from Safari. So I don't think that not being in a working group is slowing us down at all. It's just
I'm sensitive to that. I'm just saying, in terms of positive signals for implementation, Web Bluetooth seems to be the most advanced of the three specs mentioned.
Right.
And if we were to do a rechartering, and again, whether you want it or not is obviously up to you guys, but if we were to want to make such a transition, I think it would be logical to start with formally adding Web Bluetooth to the device charter, possibly or not, I don't know, Web NFC, and then have Web USB as a future scope.
Yeah.
Charter. But again, whether and when is something you guys need to do.
Don't we have this provision in the device and sensors charter that you can add things in a way, like how we added wake clock API? That was like CFC, some sort of like, how was it?
It was stretching or reading of the scope. So the current way we wrote charter is, if we add anything to any new deliverable to the charter that fits in the widely defined scope, connecting devices essentially, then we ask people that do the review to only focus on the new deliverable and not to do a full review of the overall charter. But that's
and yeah, that is the text.
Yeah, so it should be straightforward to get things added whenever we want to.
Yeah, there is this new text that is about the WISE web platform integration. See, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the wording we need. So it's just when we want to use. And like Bluetooth, doesn't have any kind of internal pressure to move, but we also don't have any opposition to it. Eventually, of course, we want to be on the recommendation track just to get the patent protection. But we don't really care.
So I guess, again, maybe I will communicate some minor pressure to move. I think this is great work, and it ought to be a standard sooner than later, but I don't think my pressure comes from much. But anyway, I guess my overall message is, who to call whenever you want this to happen.
Right. Who's the chair of device and sensors? Maybe we should talk to them and see if they're eager to get us, and yeah.
Yeah. So Frederick has been sharing the group, although he has had some recent personal issues. So I don't know what the future looks like. But to be pretty clear, if you ask Frederick, he will ask me, and I'll ask him. So I'll tell him that I'm eager. So, but yeah, I think more interestingly would probably be to hear from other either implementers or Bluetooth device vendors or other companies that might.
Yeah, I think it doesn't add much in terms of like okay, you guys, like W3C staff has to do more things, like more process-oriented things. But I think we and you guys can continue advance with the spec in a similar fashion. We use GitHub. The style of the spec changes slightly. I think that's the major, like if you think about day-to-day work.
Yeah, except when shit happens, essentially day-to-day work is exactly the same. And the only thing is that if you get like a formal objection or so, it's a lot more formal in the working group process than it would be in a committee group.
Right.
Yeah, and I also hear your perspective that you also don't get necessarily a lot of pressure to move to the more formal approach. So I mean, at some point, it's also figuring out when you actually get benefits from doing that transition in terms of IPR and participation, take-up.
Right. Yeah, we haven't been asked by anyone to move to the spec, to move to the working group. But we do want to be a recommendation eventually. Does it make sense to say that we'll move when kind of a second? Let's see. Well, so we have Servo as kind of a second implementation. Should we move when a second like major browser picks it up, like Firefox, Edge, or Safari?
So I know. So whether you should is something that only the community group can answer. I guess from my perspective, one reason why you might want to move sooner rather than later, I mean, given that I think the server implementation counts as a positive signal, is that at least in terms of the IPR process, there is a minimum amount of time that you need to spend in the recommendation track.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than wait for 5 months that this time expires, if we can have gone through most of that time beforehand, then that's that much less time wasted. But that's maybe a minor thing. So
what was the minimal time from first public version draft to rec? Because I think HTML release is trying to.
Yeah, so I think the formal minimum process time is 150 days plus something.
150 days, because given that the web load is very well baked spec, it's like in a good shape. So technically it could move pretty fast through the standard track. So
yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that will slow down web Bluetooth, for instance, on the rec track is the second implementation. And possibly. So, Jeffrey, is there any test cases for the web Bluetooth spec?
We don't have anything. We have nothing in web platform tests. We've got layout tests, excuse me, in Chrome, and they'll need some massaging in order to get into web platform tests. I think Geo is going to be tackling that reasonably soon. And even the layout tests aren't quite perfect. We want some way to do an end-to-end test and actually check that you've integrated with your platform correctly. So the testing situation is not great right now.
Okay, and that's another thing that could slow us down a little, although yeah, it's hard to say in the abstract.
Yeah, I mean, we are sharing the same, like, how to do functional testing in sensor space, for example. Like something like a web driver doesn't help us enough. So I mean, you need to have something like testing just for the interface correctness is quite not enough.
Right.
I mean, Jeffrey, you did some good work there. So what was the latest on the functional testing side? What type of machinery you have built for that? You had some purpose-made APIs that I'm not sure if you shipped those or you had a separate spec for those, actually.
Yeah, there's a separate spec for kind of setting up some mock Bluetooth devices, interacting with the chooser, and the browser implements that probably in just a testing mode, and you run your tests, and it checks that kind of a bigger set of the browser API or the browser stack works, but that still doesn't test down to the operating system. So you could implement the whole browser correctly and still not actually make any Bluetooth calls.
That's hard to get. You know, you cannot, as far as I understand, it's very hard to create such a test suite that works across platforms. Impossible even,
so
unless you standardize an API.
We want to define a way to configure like actual physical Bluetooth radios. So we have some NRF52s that we're planning to kind of write the mocks into them and then actually do the full test with a radio. But we haven't done that yet. I don't think we'll need to block on it in order to say that the web platform tests are good, but that's what I actually want in order to like make sure that implementations interoperate.
Yeah, I think we would not get blocked on that one. So it would be, we could make a case when we get to this particular phase that, hey, these aspects are actually something that need to be tested on basis, you know, for every platform, because there's no cross-platform mechanisms available to do functional testing to the extent required. So no issues there.
Are we aware of any other device-centric specification that does have some reasonable tests, or how anyone else has approached tests like this? It certainly is a challenge, and I'd like to know if there was anything else out there with an opinion on how to handle it.
I think we have, like in device and sensors group, we have some very trivial APIs like vibration. So, it's just like you need human to actually, inspect the test result, run the test, and then if the device vibrates as specified, then it is passed. So, but that doesn't help us here. So if you want something that's fully automated, I think there's no spec. How is the web artist sitting? If that's another case where you have okay, the second screen as well, but that's...
Yeah, you guys will be best.
Yeah, we have...
I think Mozilla back in the Firefox days had a mechanism, was it MochiTest or Marionette, that helped some of these physical integration tests. But yeah, I think the short story is that there is no widely shared framework for this at the moment. And from the spec perspective, it's really beyond the thing we need to demonstrate in an automated fashion, at least. And of course, we need to say, yes, we've run the test, we've manually verified that this is not complete random output. But that's, again, beyond what is to be demonstrated for purely spec purpose.
We definitely wouldn't want to go to like last call until Chrome ships, I think, just so that we can get the, be sure that the API we have is right. It's possible that we'd want to like write out the subset that Chrome has shipped. We'll definitely mark, I guess we have to mark everything that we haven't shipped as at risk. Because there's a chunk of the API that is specified but not implemented at all. And so we, of course, have less confidence in that.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So you're saying that current web Bluetooth spec, you implement a subset of it. And,
yes.
And that subset is not annotated in the spec yet. So I think it would be helpful to somehow flag them out. I think in ByteChat, you're using ByteChat, right? So maybe there's an easy way to somehow highlight those parts, like as an experimental or whatever, that are not implemented. So I mean, that would be actually very valuable feedback for other implementers who are looking at the spec to quickly figure out what is actually, what is in, exactly, because that kind of might mean that, hey, actually, it's a less work than it looks like on the first glimpse. So that would be, I mean, I would +1 on that one. But what is the roughly estimate if you look at the API now? So like in terms of, it's hard to give an estimate, but you have implemented 2/3 or
so you
3/4, or what is the?
You had this in the implementation status file.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The implementation status does not list every part of the spec yet. And that's something that I would like to do, but just haven't done yet. Let me share that page. Yeah, so we've got this list of things that we've implemented and things that we haven't. Some things that are like not listed here, but we also haven't implemented are like descriptors and the service changed event. And there may be some other stuff. Let's see. We haven't done watch advertisements. That's listed, so.
Event bubbling was in here.
Event what?
Bubbling?
Bubbling, yes. That may be most of it.
Okay, it looks good. I think the Windows work is just you haven't just had anyone to work on it, so there's no no issues with the platform side.
Yeah, so the platform side is, I think, not something we would mark in the spec, but the fact that like we haven't done descriptors at all is something we would mark in the spec.
Okay. Yeah, we actually got Toby's in the room. I was thinking, like, is there any, like Jeffrey working on the web Bluetooth? I remember like the sensors work. We had some discussions. Was it in the permission scope or something that we needed to clarify with Jeffrey?
Yeah, so sorry, I actually just showed up here because I was hoping to go have a drink or a coffee with Jeffrey after this meeting. I didn't know you were like, agreed or something. So I'm like super disappointed. Hi.
Yeah. I can, if you move the camera so that you can. So Toby wanted to have like a coffee with you. Well, now you can have this virtual coffee.
Yeah, no, we have like, so on the permissioning side, is that what you
I remember you have some.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we need to talk about the permission stuff. So I'm just back in the sensor loop since like about like 3 days. So I'm just like trying to catch up with stuff and like I'm just like confused. But I wanna.
You can move closer if you want.
Would you like me to move closer? Is that?
Maybe a little bit closer. I can mostly hear you from there, but yeah.
Well, the thing is the microphone.
That's enough.
Oh, it's on the left. Oh, okay. So okay, is that better?
That's great.
So and now I completely lost my context.
Something
Basically, I was curious to have an update on the permissioning stuff. And I mean, I don't know if it's like really appropriate to bother everyone that's here with this conversation.
It's fine.
Oh, so no one is listening? Like everyone's really interested?
It's fine.
Okay. So I don't know where you're at with permissions right now. And basically, what we're looking at for the sensor stuff is to figure out how we should handle permissions for a whole bunch of sensors that are very similar, but not necessarily precisely the same. So for example, what we're talking about today was like old motion sensors, which are, like a gyroscope, an accelerometer, a magnetometer. Do we want to look for like a permission on, like a permission name on a per sensor, per concrete sensor basis? Do we want to group them? How, like, basically how does this whole thing work? So that's one part of the problem.
Secondly, what Kath brought up was, could we do permissioning where instead of passing a string, we pass an object? So, for example, we build a concrete like gyroscope object, like construct the object and pass the object instead, and ask the permission to basically use that object. So, like either through an opaque string, like the object would stringify into a permission or something like that. I don't know. So basically, like a whole bunch of it seems that like the sensor stuff is going to have like quite complex permission questions, and I need to talk to you about those. And then the other aspect is what about like permissions in workers and shared workers? Is there an API that lets us ask these or these different levels of permissions? And so I'm just throwing all of this stuff. Right? This is the stuff we need to figure out, which is I was going to throw all of this and then like offer you beer or like whatever it is you drink, and then we could have like have the evening to like kind of like start making sense of it all.
There's also going to be a permissions session as part of WebAppSec later this week, which I'm also dialing into. So that's focused on whether requests should exist, I think, although that may be getting answered pretty quickly. So we should also talk about this at that point. I think that's Thursday at 2.
Thursday at 2, so I thought I had nothing to do on the Thursday. Maybe it's my Thursday.
That will have like Marcos and I think Ramey's from the Chrome team in Australia.
The web USB guy.
So what is that? Whom is 2? And is it at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m.? I'm confused now.
2 p.m. Lisbon time, 6 a.m. West Coast time, and 11 p.m. Sydney time.
Oh, sounds like I'm in the right place.
Yeah, because there's more people there. I think that's Thursday. It's either Thursday or Friday in WebAppSec. And that'll probably be the best time to get a bunch of opinions.
Okay, so I might read up on the whole thing and see where you're at before that. Then I'll do that.
Create some issues, maybe.
Add more issues.
Yeah, not to go. We talked about the feature policy spec that is undergoing incubation. So it kind of Jeffrey can explain it better what it is, but it might be relevant to the sensors work. So give me like a 10-second of our feature policy for Adobe.
Right. Feature policy allows a page to turn various features on and off for it and its iframes. Features include. Sorry, what?
It's origin based, or no? It's not like CSP.
It is like It's a little like CSP. It is origin based, but it's also like what the containing page gets to turn things on and off for the iframes that it contains by origin. So you can say like turn off the accelerometer by default, but turn it on for this origin that I trust. And as a top-level page, any origin will have the browser's defaults, but it can control things for its iframes. So this doesn't answer any of the questions you actually asked, but it's another thing you should think about.
Yeah, more confusion.
It's like the good news is I raised an issue for that.
Yeah.
on the sensor stuff?
Yeah.
And how's that a good news? I don't understand. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for all of this extra information.
Yes.
Yeah, the link is that basically the streams or whatever names are kind of or should be shared with.
Yeah.
It's
The
something that this spec consumes.
And so, as a quick question, have you thought about like combining these permission names into like grouping, like having some kind of like tree of like permission?
Right.
Where like level stuff and it would give you a little level ones or something like that?
Right. The permission.query function takes an object. Most permissions are not using that yet, and because of that, Anna wants to not take an object anymore. But things like Bluetooth and media take some extra information beyond the permission name.
Sure, probably sensors would do the same.
Yeah,
I think it's more like, not like make things like Bluetooth more fine-grained, but bundle something like Bluetooth and something else a lot.
Right.
Well, it could be a way. I mean, you could look at the other way, which is you would be asking for like motion sensor permission, and then you could have like in the second object you could have like say accelerometer true and like gyroscope false or something like that. Is that what you were thinking about?
You could do it that way, yeah. I don't know what taxonomy will want, but you can definitely say like the permission name is something general and then has extra fields to describe the details.
Yeah, well, what is Google's like Adrian and folks, like those guys who think about the UX side of permissions? So what is their latest thinking around this
right.
stuff?
I haven't heard anything about detailed sensor stuff. I think that they would generally do it as, well, I don't think there's any new thinking. So like if you ask for accelerometer, the user would get a question about the accelerometer. Or if you ask for this like group of three things, you might get.
So you actually.
Sorry, what?
Sorry, you actually map like the names to like what you ask the user. You don't combine this stuff to make it more like user friendly.
We mostly don't yet.
Okay.
We'd like to in some cases.
That would make sense.
But like that combinatorial set of UIs is difficult.
All right, I'm gonna think about all of this. Thank you.
Yeah. Talk to you on Thursday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're done with Bluetooth related stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for dialing in.
Yeah, so Lisbon is moving on to other things now.
Yep.
Okay. Bye.
Have a good day.
Take care.